Hey there, this is episode 107 of The First 10 Minutes. I'm Tony Parmenter.
I'm Steve Halliwell.
And I'm Aaron Williams.
And this is a video games podcast where we play the first 10 minutes of a video game. Then we sit down here to discuss how well that game communicates itself to the player, both in terms of what the game is about and how to play the game. And in response to our latest listener poll, which you can find at The First 10 Minutes on Twitter, you, the listeners, voted for us to play Paperbark. Aaron, you played Paperbark. Take it away.
Yes, I did. It was good.
And thanks for listening.
Yep, that'll do it. So Wikipedia had an entry for Paperbark, but it was outdated. So I went with the website instead, with paperbarkgame.com /#/ which has to say that Paperbark is a game that tells a charming short story of the bush, a wombat, and a very hot Australian summer. It presents a sincere representation of Australian bushland, which is inspired by iconic historical and contemporary landscape artists and Australian children's literature. The player follows a sleepy wombat who spends its day exploring and foraging while in search for a new home. As the story unfolds and new locations are discovered, the adventure builds with the heat of the day. The game has been created as a love letter to wandering through the bush and will resonate with anyone who grew up in Australia or is interested in it.
Nice.
Yeah. And from my 10 minutes, that's a pretty accurate description. But for good radio, let me go a little bit deeper into the specifics of that 10 minutes.
I like it.
So the game opens with a sound that gives me something that I'm always grateful for when it happens, which is a very specific love that I have for my country, and that's the distinct warble of a magpie. I adore magpies with every fiber of my being. Even more so when I learned about the fact that they'll come and hang around. Like if you get through the wall of them being territorial and thinking that you're a predator near their nest, they'll eventually come to befriend you, and they'll march out their little baby magpies to introduce them to you. But anyway, that's what I hear. And that eventually gives way to the main menu, which is basically a snapshot of the Australian outback, of the bush. And I'm once again sort of struck by just how much I really like the sort of the singularity of the colors of the outback, of the bush. Sort of everything muted a little bit, though it does hold color. It's sort of a muted palette. I've got written on my notes that it's a dry death aesthetic, but a peaceful death.
Would you say that it's a sunburnt country, Aaron?
I might indeed. The game opens with an acknowledgement and respect to the traditional owners of the land, and then a gum tree that sort of blotches in, like paint blotches in the bottom left, with a white void sort of on the remainder of the phone screen. This is a phone game. I should probably make mention. And so this gum tree blotches in the bottom left, and then I'm told with one word in the middle of the screen, I'm told to paint. And so this being a phone game, I go ahead and evoke that motion. I start swiping my finger across the screen and I start to paint the landscape in, and it's quite fucking lovely.
How does that paint in? What does that look? What does that kind of look like or feel like when you're doing that?
Yeah, so it's almost like I'm basically clearing the fog. So imagine if this was an RTS and I was moving units through. Essentially, I'm doing that, but just by not moving any actual units throughout the world. So in holding down my finger and dragging across the screen, I sort of clear the white, as it were, and the paint kind of emerges from outside of it.
So we're talking something in the style of the Unfinished Swan kind of vibe?
Not.
Although I'm just deep pulling a different game.
No. You're not out of line in saying the Unfinished One. The Unfinished One sort of uses paint is sort of material in the Unfinished One. And I guess the difference here is that within Paperbark, it seems like this stuff was sitting underneath the white to begin with, and I'm just sort of clearing away to make room for it.
And also, if you're saying that you're clearing things, that certainly is in keeping with a lot of what we do to the Australian bush. So that's good.
A little bit. It's almost like I'm making it appear or reappear.
I'm putting politics in this game.
You should.
I agree. That's why I did it.
There's a bushfire in this, and it's never said how it was started.
That's very Australian. So
that's fuck. You gotta Gotta love it though. Gotta love that Australia.
So we've said this word Australia a lot. We've all been practicing our Australian accents
Yeah, fuck no.
to sound legit in this particular episode. It's
yeah.
True blue.
it's probably worth pointing out that this game was made in Australia.
That would be correct. So this game was developed by Paperhouse. They're a team in Victoria.
Nice. And for any overseas listeners, Victoria is a state in Australia.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've probably heard of Melbourne before. That is the place that's in Victoria. If you've seen The
Very good.
Leftovers Season 3, you've seen the bar that we all hang out at the end of Melbourne International Games Week. Bit of trivia for you. But anyway, I'm told to paint.
That's surprisingly relevant to our listening audience, though.
I mean, it really is.
You'd think it'd be an obscure reference, but they probably all get it.
Yeah. The game tells me to paint, and the thing that I really like about this is that the way that this kind of works, and the way in which sort of the foliage falls off and disappears into the white void, is that it actually kind of functions in me creating my own picture book illustrations. In that quite often within a picture book, you'll have elements of the page that have been painted in with detail to focus on what requires focus in that particular moment. And it really holds a similar sort of visual aesthetic in doing so. Assisting this is also the Australian voice that's narrating throughout the experience intermittently, sparse. So within every couple of minutes, I might hear a new little clip. Just educating me on the area, and it's wrapped mostly around prose that's connected to the wombat. The wombat that I mentioned earlier being sort of a focal point of this game. So this is all before I've actually started playing the game, and at this point I'm kind of reminded a lot of two children's books in particular that I read a lot when I was growing up. The first is Possum Magic, the Mem Fox book, and the other is Wombat Stew, and I cannot remember the author of that particular one. But that's not a little bit of gallows humor from me. I genuinely do see Wombat Stew in this game about a wombat. It's a book about a cheeky dingo that wants to eat a wombat, and his friends are like, "Oh, we'll help you," and it's like, "You should put gum nuts in there, or that'll make the stew taste really nice," and like flies and stuff. And then he tries the broth, and he's like, "This is terrible," and leaves the wombat alone. And that was Marsha Vaughan, by the way.
If we're going to go for deep pulls of wombat related children's books, then it would be remiss of me not to mention Diary of a Wombat by Jackie French as well.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Eating all those carrots.
Yep.
that's good.
There we go.
And while we're crediting people, the illustrator of Wombat Stew was Pamela Loss, and the illustrator of Possum Magic was Julie Vivas. Important
Nice.
jobs. So I'm getting a lot of nostalgia here. So what it says on the tin is absolutely providing for me. We got some music in this opening moment as well. It's a violin that's sort of playing an agitated tempo but pleasant notes. So I've got written here that it's like Max Richter but optimistic. The game is divided into chapters, so much like a book, a children's book, or otherwise.
Nice.
So eventually I get into play. The wombat wakes up from sleeping in a tree. It's stuck in, and I am given control. So painting is still a thing, but I also point and tap to move the wombat through the environment. So essentially, I think the loop that I sort of get into is I tap an area for the wombat to go. The wombat will start to fill in the terrain for me, but painting assists in sort of seeing branching paths moving ahead, other objects of interest within the environment.
Okay, so you can tap to move the wombat, but you can also paint the screen to reveal more of the terrain for
That's right.
yourself.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it really seems like that's the sort of behavior that's encouraging me to get into, because though it is kind of the path is sort of straightforward and narrow to begin with, it eventually sort of opens up to the point where it's bushland. So there's many different ways that I can go, and it's nice to have that opportunity to see what's ahead before I reach it. So as I start moving through the area, there's little bits of encouragement to show me that I'm heading in the right way. So there's wombat tracks in the ground that slightly are illuminated. So it's one of the only moments of actual abstraction from, trying to fully embody wombat in the bush. It's one of the only moments where it's like, hey, point of interest, blinking, electricity. There's also as I'm going through there's sort of this pleasant humming noise that's signaling to me that I'm heading in the right way as I start heading in that right direction. So any sort of scored music is gone at this point, but there is still a music because I've got plenty of, bush bird song that's happening. So the ambience that's being utilized here is very, very particular and well achieved. Like most mobile games, it recommends that you pop headphones on when you start play, but this really truly means it. There's a lot of left and right speaker panning that's happening to sort of indicate birds in flight, environmental objects that are happening to really fully embody that bushland environment. There's also, as I found, I didn't quite notice this. I thought this was just the sound of me hitting my phone screen as I was playing the game, but there's a really pleasant, thick tap registering noise every time I tap, and the fact that I'm actually tapping dirt when I'm doing that really kind of adds to that feel.
Juicy.
It's very good. It is a nice one. The wombat. This is where I start going into just observations of what the wombat did. The wombat will occasionally stop to eat hovea. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Hovea, the purple bushy flowers.
Not a botanist, zoologist.
Yeah.
Cool, that's all right. It's Hovea is the spelling. I never learned how to pronounce it, and I just realized I have to pronounce it, and I'm like, shit, Hovea, because wombats eat that.
Cool.
When I do eat the first patch of Hovea, I'm informed that it's a collectible. I have one of 15 of them. And there are also 55 bugs and one wattle that's indicated by the UI pop-up that appears very, very briefly.
Right.
So this communicates something to me. There's one or two ways that I could go in terms of what I think this is representing to me, but my interpretation based on what I've been through to date and seeing this as a children's book is this is telling me that I'm probably going to play this game a lot, that I'm going to return to it a bunch, that I don't think that this is going to be a length that would have 55 bugs sort of evenly scattered through a 6-hour run through. I get the feeling like this will be a very, very short experience that I will return to a lot, kind of like reading a children's book. Yeah, and I thought that was really cool.
Nice.
There's more of that coming up. But first of all, I get some blowflies giving me grief, as they are wont to do, the bloody bastards. Occasionally, my play is interrupted for an animated page of the book, which is really nice. Camera takes over control. It sort of washes out any terrain that I've revealed up to that point, and focuses in on actually crafting out a children's picture book portrait about the wombat just struggling to fit through the log. The writing is very, very particular, and the cadence of it is also quite specific. Sort of reminds me of like the best, Noni Hazelhurst reading on an episode of Play School.
Okay.
It's like I really feel like I am like locked in and just like, tell me more, Noni. What happens to the wombat?
Full of Australian references. This is wonderful.
We're not done. I took the opportunity.
I feel like I'm a kid again. All of 10 years ago. Am I right?
Yep.
You're close to right with one of us.
Thanks for pointing out my advanced age, Aaron. I appreciate it.
To be honest, it's not really close to me anymore. I have to shave off probably 2 of those. Anyway, I also find sparkly stickers in another brief moment of abstraction from just being a wombat in the bush. I find a sticker of what looks like a maybe a bowerbird, maybe something else. I don't know. I'm not a zoologist. I'm a botanist apparently. The thing.
What's this herb, Aaron?
Yeah.
Can you identify this herb for me?
I can probably help you. Just need to try one chemical process and give me about 5 to 10 minutes, and I can let you know. So these sparkly stickers, right? There's sparkly stickers, and when I grab one, it brings up an overlay that asks me to actually like physically stick the bird to the relevant outline in the collector's book.
Nice.
It's great, and the thing that I really like about it is that it fits perfectly. Unlike, because I'm just tripping merrily along through childhood memories, not like my Golden Casket news agency Rugrats collectible stickers booklet, which I would always, they're fucking rectangles, but somehow I managed to put them in wonky. Somehow. And then they're fucking done after that point. Now you know why playing Gloomhaven and reaching the end of the day is such a tense experience from my end. Because it's like this.
Oh god, it's sticker time.
But and it's even worse now because they're fucking oblongs. They're small oblongs. What's a boy to do?
Play more Gloomhaven and get better.
Yeah, I suppose so. That's it. We just need to do more of it and apply more stickers. So this is a nice little opportunity to prompt that footage of this game being played is available on our YouTube channel, which you should absolutely check out. And you should specifically look out for the moment where it looks almost like I try to avoid a pile of animal shit. What I was actually doing was seeing if the log that I jumped over was a point of no return. But it really looks, I didn't even notice the shit until I was rewatching the footage. But I have gone and crafted a moment that looks like the wombat is like, ew, gross, goes to turn around, try to go back, and then just decides to walk through the shit. So look forward to that.
I like it.
It's around here that I start to think about the level design of where I'm going through, like, because I started to wonder why I needed footprints in the first place, why I needed footprints on the ground to sort of lead me in the right direction. Because initially I was sort of feeling like there's one direction to go, it's one path. Right. But the more I painted the landscape, the more I started to see sort of an opening in terms of there were different lanes, like dirt paths that I could go down. And there's an attempt here to mimic the way in which animals carve out paths within the bush and how over time that sort of creates makeshift roads. But there's the right balance of sort of authenticity and, player directed lanes. It's really cool. And there's consistent sort of reminders via the narration that indicate that the wombat's hunger is sort of fueling its persistent nature. That sort of
Can I jump in with a question?
Yeah, for sure.
You're talking about multiple potential paths and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Did you feel like there was a right way to go and a wrong way to go?
No.
Or were there just many right ways to go?
No, and so it's actually it's kind of that reminder that the wombat's hungry and is following that hunger that sort of communicates to me that I shouldn't care where I do or don't go. I should just trust that where I'm tapping is the right way.
Right.
It really seems like no matter what, I get footprints and I get humming to say like you're going there. And to be honest, like I wonder if I were to return to this, whether or not there would actually be branching paths or whether it might just be sort of circuiting me around back to the same place.
Right.
That the staple points might actually be exactly in the same area.
But in any case, no matter where you went, you felt rewarded.
Totally. Yeah, and there was never too great of a gap between me encountering some other variation within the environment. So be that the blowflies showing up, be that the pile of animal shit, or be that a storybook moment. There's always a good dispensation of content.
Nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And it also, like, the other cool thing that this does is it's sort of yet another layer in that idea of this is a book that you should be returning to. This is a book that you should be, it's what do you want to read tonight, kids? I want to read Paperbark. And there's an opportunity there to continue sort of like seeing what else there is. Or by the same token, not really giving a shit when you load up what path you take this time. Whether it's the same path as last time or a completely different path, it doesn't matter. Paperbark is the same experience ultimately.
All right. Because I know you love discussions about story and narrative, does this feel like there is a progression from a beginning through a middle to an end, or is this a roaming adventure? where it's more about just sort of marinating in the moment?
There definitely feels like a through line in that I'm a wombat that's hungry. And though I occasionally find a little bit of food, my hunger is never sated. So I get the idea of like, okay, my purpose within this is to keep following the hunger. While I'm doing this, and so it's very, very soon that I'll get to another chapter, at which point I move into another area. So after I piss off some fairy wrens by falling into their nest, and then I get hit. That gives me a little storybook moment, and I get hit with chapter 2, the wetlands, and that's an opportunity to sort of show me another area of bushland. So I get the feeling that it's sort of there is a plot through line of wombat is hungry, wombat collects food, wombat encounters animal, rinse, repeat, as an opportunity to tour me through bushland. And also remind me of the reality of this landscape. Because there's all.
I'm super curious now. Sorry, you said wetland, and my brain exploded. Confession, dear viewers. Sorry, dear listeners. I have not watched Aaron's video yet. My apologies. But now that you said wetlands, can I take a guess? Are there any birds in these wetlands? Can I guess what they are?
You can go right ahead and guess.
I'm going to say moorhens and or swamp hens. I'm going to say egrets, and I'm going to say spoonbills.
Okay, so you are correct in that in this chapter, I only encounter one bird or one species of bird. The following chapter, I encounter many, many more. But spoonbills are the birds that I hang out with.
What color were their bills?
Their bills were a yellowish brown.
Nice,
I believe. They were chill. They were chill.
There's more than one type of spoonbill.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It's they're white bodies, yellow brown bills. Weird looking, but chill as hell.
I have a photo of me as a kid somewhere doing field work with my parents where I'm holding a fledgling spoonbill that was covered in bird lice, and the bottom of the dinghy was just like 3 or 4 centimeters deep in bird lice.
That's horrifying.
It was memorable.
Yeah. That is truly skin crawling.
They don't bite people, but anyway.
That's the reality of the landscape that Paperbark mercifully kind of gently steers away from. Though there is natural disaster involved. Spoiler.
Yep. So yes, yellow-billed spoonbills. I'm all for it.
Yeah, there's spoonbills. The other things that the wetlands has to offer are more grass, mud for a terrain change. Some blueies and some bullfrogs.
Nice.
So I come to find as I move through this area that one or more of the blue tongues are leading me through the area and always giving me the classic blue tongue fuck off poke every time I see one of them. I get a good scratch on a good logo. Get to see the wombat enjoy a good log, and then that's it. So coincidentally, at the end of the chapter, we move into chapter 3, the riverbirds from there. But it is at sorry Tony, but it's at the point when I was scratching my bum on a log that the buzzer went off.
Right,
and I had timing though.
And I had to say hooroo to the world of Paperbark, which I did long enough to hit stop on the recording of the screen capture that I was doing, and then went back into Paperbark and finished it.
Right. I have so many questions.
Shoot. Well, that's what we're here for.
Yep.
Aaron, what's your goal? I'm being deliberately provocatory. What's your goal?
Wombat's goal or player's goal?
First one, then the other.
Okay. Wombat's goal is to eat. Player's goal is to explore the bush.
Right.
Yeah. That's it.
Heading towards the objective of finding all the things. You said there were collectible tallies.
There were collectibles, but that really felt like a passive sort of, here is an activity to just keep your eye out for as you go through. So one of the things that I mentioned was there was like 55 beetles. So I was wondering, I was like, that really doesn't seem to gel with the idea of this being a really short experience, unless these things have been.
That's a lot of extra beetles.
Yeah,
you got John, you got Paul, you got George,
so many.
You got Ringo.
I mean,
and then
Kanye,
51 others.
Kanye's
so.
in there too. You know, they're all over the shop. But it was after I first ate the Hovea, and I saw that list. I started to wonder. I was like, surely I haven't been missing these beetles. Reviewing the footage, I totally have been. They're fucking everywhere.
Right.
But they're also very well. They're camouflaged. Like they're cicadas. Like they're not there to be seen. They're there to stumble upon. You know, in the same way
Right.
that you would stumble upon a grasshopper or a cicada if you were out in the bush. You hear it, and if you're lucky, you see it.
Or you get pissed on by the cicadas.
Or you get pissed on by the cicadas if you know you can feel it too. But I get the feeling like that is something that I can just chip away at as I continue to return to this game over and over and over again.
Right.
Yeah. And so in terms of like a meta, like long-term goal, the goal of Paperbark is to have it be the formative piece of literature for your child.
Right. Speaking of childhood, Aaron.
Yeah.
Just listening to you talk about this has evoked many memories for me across a wide spectrum of experiences.
Likewise.
In terms of actual, walking around the world experiences, as well as literary, quote unquote. I'm kind of including television and stuff in there. I have thought about Secret Valley for the first time in in many years. Now that we're discussing this, and because I can't think of a way to easily sort of slide the topic in, Mr. Squiggle has also popped into my head unprompted.
Mr. Squiggle's definitely here.
There is a massive evocation of not just Australiana, but Australian childhood that I'm getting from this game. So I'm curious, as like all three of us, spoilers, grew up in Australia, or if we didn't, then I'm about to learn something about the two of you that I don't know yet. That's a very particular thing.
Yes.
So I would imagine it's difficult to try and put yourself in the mindset of a different consumer, but in what way?
Fuck you.
Hey, you played this and you nominated it, so you wear it.
All right.
I'm just going to be blunt.
Yeah, go for it.
The cultural cringe is a thing.
Yes.
That this country has been wrangling with for decades now.
Yeah.
And there's always this wrangling that people in Australia seem to be doing with coming to terms with the many faceted cultural heritages that we have.
Yeah.
This is staking out a very particular corner of that experience. What is this trying to convey to people who have experienced that thing versus people who are completely new to it?
So this is the interactive digital equivalent of Barry McKenzie.
That was not what I expected you to say, but please continue.
No, I'm totally fucking kidding. This is the goal of this game is the antithesis of Barry McKenzie, right? Like where Barry McKenzie is part of one cultural identity we have within Australia, which was sort of this refutation of culture, this idea of like, nah, we ain't got fucking culture. You's the ones that got culture, and it's all weird. It's all fucking weird. This, on the other hand, is just flipping around to essentially looking at the singularity of our landscape.
Right.
The fact that the wildlife we have and the ecology that surrounds it is its own alien sort of thing. One of my favorite, like I watched. This is probably the reason this particular perspective is bouncing around in my head is because my partner and I watched the original Picnic at Hanging Rock over the weekend.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. Just fucking amazing. Peter Weir is good filmmaker. And the thing that I love about that movie is the fact that it's kind of just communicating like just fucking surrender to the landscape, like just let go, like. It's this place is sweaty, it's sexy, and it's weird, and just let that wash over you. Eat that banana. Don't worry. And while this game is not riddled, overflowing with sexual tension, it is operating within a similar vein of just being enamored with to avoid being sort of cliche and hokey within the Australian terminology, but it's this sort of you know quiet contemplation of awe and love for our backyard.
Right.
And it's sort of an invitation of sorts to other audiences. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how global this game is shooting for. I mean, this is about wildlife. This is about untamed wilderness. This isn't about wilderness that we spend our time in. So it's not necessarily a tourism campaign. It's just kind of an opportunity in the same way that an Attenborough documentary reveals to us photography of landscapes, animals, places that we can't go in contact with and sort of tour and walk around. This is doing the same thing just through digital art.
So it's an appreciation.
Yeah, it's an appreciation from within. It's an insider's perspective.
I'm in a very curious position here, having spent far more than the average Australian's time in remote parts of the country because of the particulars of my upbringing. So this is evoking a lot of very strong feelings and a lot of very strong memories in me. And listeners, if you're not aware, I do have a degree in zoology. So there's a whole other facet of this as well. Aaron, I'm really curious, why a wombat?
Oh, because they're fucking funny. Like, they're just...
There are so many Australian animals that are fucking funny.
Yeah, but, like, we can't have a koala because it wouldn't fucking move. Like, wombats travel, Yeah. Wombats are
no judging.
Wombats are cuddly, and they travel, and they're funny, and they do really loud farts, and they're good. Like, wombats are cool, man. Yeah, I don't know. Like, wombat is a weird choice, but I don't know. It feels like an appropriate choice. Just in terms of, like, I don't know. I struggle to really envision an alternative for for an experience that is about meandering through the Australian bushland.
Yep.
That screams wombat to me. Not that I wouldn't want to play the Cassowary DLC. I just think it would be a startlingly different experience. And this one is built around sort of, quiet, plodding contemplation.
Right.
I think it also aligns with what you're talking about there around this is tapping into parts of Australian culture that aren't necessarily widely known or that aren't turned into a tourist commodity.
Right.
For sure. Because
if you make this a kangaroo, then everyone sort of kind of understands a kangaroo in a way that doesn't make sense for what you want this game to be, and the same for a koala.
And I think it's also telling when you said that the game starts with the sound of a very iconic Australian bird. I was just waiting for you to say a cockatoo
or a kookaburra.
Or a kookaburra. Yeah. And you didn't.
Yeah.
And I think the magpie factor I think is really, I find very interesting, because if you're in your backyard, you're going to hear a magpie.
Yeah.
But you are much less likely to hear a cockatoo.
Well, that's it, right? Like, that's we get...
I'm generalizing horribly here, but yes.
Yeah, to any potential global listeners, we get just as excited when we hear a kookaburra or a cockatoo. They're rare. Like, they don't show up often. It's awesome when they do.
They don't tend to live in the cities, no.
No. You got to...
Yes, my favourite kookaburra is actually the blue-winged kookaburra, which you don't hear very often around the cities, but the blue-winged kookaburra has a completely different call from the laughing kookaburra.
Oh, yeah?
And it's very good. Many months of field work where I was listening to those at dawn and dusk. Very good.
Nice.
Sorry, I interrupted with another zoology story.
No, not at all. I think, Steve, you're bang on the money in that. Yeah, this is, and Tony, you as well, in terms of the idea of the wombat and the magpie sort of sitting in as lesser known examples of Australian wildlife that at once will be iconic to those of us from the country and compelling and perhaps familiar to those who aren't. It's almost sort of like like I'm reminded of that rule of point and click adventure game logic from Tim Schafer, and that you don't go with the obvious one, you go with the next one. You know, you do your list of solutions to a puzzle, you get the most obvious, you say no to that and go with the one after that. There's a lot of choices. Like I see a spoonbill is the first wetlands bird that I see. Like that's something where it's like, are you an Australian pelican? What are you? And you're like, well, hang on, that doesn't make sense. You must be something different.
If you're curious, then after spoonbill on my list was magpie goose.
That's a new one to me.
There's plenty of them up north.
Are they just like geese are they geese that look like magpies, like really big magpies?
They're black and white.
That's awesome.
Yep. And they're pretty big, and they fly around in quite large flocks, and they're quite noisy.
Are they vicious?
I mean, as per any goose, I guess. So,
yeah. They're geese. They do the geese thing.
Not a lot of people get all that close to them all the time. Generalizing again, of course.
Yeah.
So there's another very, very, very Australian thing in this game, and it's right there in the title, which is Paperbark.
Yeah.
As somebody who planted a paperbark with my son, and every time I visit my parents' property, I take a picture of him standing next to the tree that we planted. Is a Melaleuca who we've called Melaleuca Skywalker.
Of course.
Paperbarks are a very Australian plant.
Yeah. I still remember the first time being instructed why it was referred to as paperbark and just being blown out of the fucking water. You know, when it was like, there's a drawing that I did on the tree. There's my drawing. Yeah, I mean, really the only other tree that comes to mind is the bunya nut trees. But that's sort of more of a Queensland specific identification. It is kind of the paperbark. It's the paperbark tree. It's the eucalyptus tree as well.
It's gonna be something eucalyptus, but paperbark is pretty iconic with the scrub
for sure,
and wetlands.
Yep.
That you mentioned.
Yep.
And it makes sense too, because like we're moving towards reminding or educating that bushfires are a thing. And paperbark burns good.
It sure do.
So really the only other thing that I had about this game that I wanted to touch on, and we're free to talk more about it if you want, or we can just let the thought sort of sit here. But children's books was something that I raised quite a bit through this. And one of the things that sort of that keeps biting at the back of my head in terms of just thinking about design and thinking about possibilities is how we can bring literature over to our computer telephones more efficiently, more effectively, in more interesting ways. And we've talked on this podcast before about the interactive choose your own adventure book that, you know, is on and off and on and off and on and off around us. But this is also, I think, another sort of step forward, or at least another idea in the pool towards that. It's a different way that I've seen of showing how we can sort of continue trying to bring literature over to this to these computer books that we're walking around with.
How so?
In that it allows me to primarily is through allowing me to paint in a way the drawings, the illustrations that I have within the book. But then on the flip side, the thing that I raise is the amount of indications that I have within this, and also my knowledge of how long this thing goes for. It takes the length of a children's book to get through. Is that I'm going to want to come back to this. If I had children and they enjoyed it, I would enjoy taking them through it again and again and again.
And I think that's a big part of the reason why having this on a touch device is so powerful.
Exactly.
That tactile sense. Yep.
And there is nothing in the way of obstruction that isn't solved by tapping. If I start eating Hovea, if I get stuck in a log, all I need to do is tap. But it's not tapping in the sense of mashing the circle button to open up the chest in God of War. It is just interact with the device and you will find your way through. That translates over to the fact that there is kind of no wrong way for me to go. beyond if you walk into a tree and continue trying to walk into that tree, you won't go far. There is this sort of just this passive sense of whatever you're doing, that's the right thing to do. You're just wandering through the bush. You're just having a bushwalk.
Nice.
Having a good old wombat bushwalk.
Steve, you're looking thoughtful.
I was trying to think if I could, like it's a playable children's book, but it stands apart in my mind at least from the other things I would put in the category, oh, that's a children's book or that's a children's app on a device, in that it feels very calm. It feels very down-tempo from what I've seen in the footage and the way you've described it. It is that children's book of like, this is the thing that you read before you're going to go to bed kind of thing. Whereas most of what I associate with an iPad or a phone and children's entertainment is either Angry Birds, so that they're just occupied.
It's sit in the back of the car and shut up.
Yeah. Like, take this and shut up, just leave me alone. Or strictly educational applications.
Yep.
Like, here's a pretty colourful thing that teaches you how to add. I can't think of any others that kind of fall into this calm, luxuriating, down-tempo kind of thing. And I think it's really interesting that that's something we can have now.
All right. Do we want to do a 10-minute check?
That sounds great.
Cool. So does this game tell me what it is? Yes, so very much. It's within 30 seconds. I know what this is. This is going to be a game about being a wombat and having a good old wander through the forest, through the bush. Does this game tell me how to play it? Yeah, in that it only once says a word to me, and that's paint. And that really feels like what I'm doing, even when I'm walking, tapping and navigating the wombat through the landscape. The wombat paints by walking. Landscape gets, filled in as the wombat moves. So it all connects around to that one verb. That is the verb for the game. Just paint. And whatever you're doing, it's the right thing to be doing. Very Bob Ross, very, very laid back. And sort of just enjoy the feel.
If there's nothing else that anyone has to talk about, I think it might be time for the plugs.
Hey, welcome to the plugs. If you've enjoyed what you've just heard us talking about, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you were thinking. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. You can either email us, classic method. The email address is contact@thefirst10minutes.com. You can also find us on many social medias.
Meaty eyes.
Yeah, I'm going for the Latin.
It almost sounded like you said meaty eyes.
Yes, all of our meaty eyes are upon you, and they will see the messages that you post to us on YouTube, Libsyn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Yes.
I think that's the main ones you'll find us on. I think we're out there in a number of other places, but those are the big ones you'll see us hanging around.
I'm so jazzed for Instagram for this episode because I can use an actual photo that I took myself.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Make sure that goes in the edit. People need to know that.
So they can figure out where you were and when you did it.
Yeah. Start tracing you.
Can commence.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear from you and let you know what's up. Let us know what you're thinking.
Please do.
If you'd like to get in contact with Tony, he can tell you how to do that now. I
can indeed. Hey, dear listeners, if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can contact me on Twitter @Calinscald. That's KALINSKALD. I also do another podcast where I talk to video game developers about what makes them tick. It's called Downloadable Context, and you can find it at downloadablecontext.com. Hey, Aaron, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
@Rundown Flamingo.
So there's no more Australian bird than a flamingo.
Yep. The most just fucking car, that orca bird.
Steve, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that thing?
Twitter's probably the best one. You can tweet me @_Steve Halliwell. I will get back to you there. I do have a closing thought for us.
Hey.
Closing thought. I believe that you are correct, and it is a Hovia acutifolia. Is the plant named for Anton Hove, who was a botanical collector who discovered it, if you will.
It's like I got no better ideas.
It's like, what if we just call it me?
Yeah.
And acutifolia, the Latin from acutus, pointed, and folia for leaf. So it's his pointy leaf plant.
Wow.
I knew we couldn't get through an episode without some cursory Googling.
I
I
had
was
to.
so happy.
It was such a gold mine.
That's like
Gold mine.
That's narcissism, but that's dumb narcissism.
It's the right kind of narcissism.
I'm gonna call this plant my fucking spiky bush plant.
Yep. Well, like they say, there's only two sure things in life: death and taxonomy. And on that note, thank you very much for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you again next time.
I
See ya.
Bye.